I never imagined I'd be kicked out of my own bank. But there I stood, being told my ID was suspicious by a manager who had no idea he was speaking to his CEO. The marble floor felt cold beneath my feet, but my face burned hot with humiliation as every customer in the lobby watched. 2 minutes later, I would fire him on the spot. The mid-morning sun streaks through the glass facade of Meridian Trust Bank's Oakridge branch, casting harsh white reflections across the polished marble floor. It's 9:05 a.m. on a Monday, and the bank has just opened its doors to the day's first customers. The air inside carries the clean, sterile scent of money and ambition, a stark contrast to the humid Atlanta heat building outside. Imani Sharp stands at the counter in simple jeans and a navy blouse. No power suit today, no executive badge, no chauffeur waiting outside. Just another customer on a Monday morning, or so it appears. Her natural curls frame her face, her minimal makeup a deliberate choice for this unannounced visit to one of her own branches. Across from her, branch manager Brad Whitman's arms fold across his chest, creating a physical barrier between himself and the woman he's decided doesn't belong here. His jaw sets in a rigid line, eyes narrowing with thinly veiled suspicion. "I'm sorry, ma'am," he emphasizes with a plastic smile that doesn't reach his eyes, "but I cannot process this transaction." His voice carries a dismissive edge that turns heads throughout the lobby. The only sounds are the soft click of a teller counting cash and the uncomfortable rustle of customers shifting nervously in line. Imani's fingers tighten around the withdrawal slip, crinkling the paper. Her heartbeat accelerates, pounding in her ears as she registers the public humiliation building in Brad's tone. This isn't just poor customer service. It's something more personal, more targeted. Brad slides her ID back across the counter with a skeptical raise of his eyebrow. "This doesn't look like you," he remarks loudly enough for nearby customers to hear. The photo shows Imani in a tailored suit with straightened hair. Today's casual appearance is by design, but to Brad, it's suspicious that a flush of heat creeps up Imani's neck. Other patrons avert their eyes or stare wide-eyed at the unfolding scene. The cool air of the bank suddenly feels oppressive against her skin. "I'd like to speak with your manager," Imani says, her voice leveled despite the storm building inside her. Brad's mouth twitches with poorly concealed amusement. "I am the manager, ma'am. Branch manager, actually." He emphasizes his title, straightening his already straight tie. "And I've made my decision. Perhaps you should try another bank." His gaze has already moved past her to the next customer, as if she's no longer worth his time. The dismissal hangs in the air like a toxic cloud. Several customers shift uncomfortably. A middle-aged black couple at the loan desk exchange knowing glances. They've seen this before. "You're refusing to let me access my own account?" Imani asks, pulse racing beneath her calm exterior. "On what grounds?" Brad sighs dramatically, as if explaining something to a child. "Look, when someone comes in requesting a $50,000 cash withdrawal with identification that doesn't match their appearance, we have protocols." He taps her ID with his index finger. "This photo doesn't match you. The signature seems different. And frankly, this account shows minimal activity until this large withdrawal request. These are red flags." Every word is a calculated insult, wrapped in policy language. The subtext is clear to everyone watching. He doesn't believe a black woman in casual clothes could legitimately have access to such funds. Security guard Chuck Rivers moves closer, his posture betraying his discomfort with the situation. As a black man himself, his eyes communicate silent sympathy to Imani. Teller Nina Patel watches from her station, biting her lip nervously. She had initially processed Imani's request before Brad intervened, and now she stands frozen, caught between professional obedience and moral discomfort. "My identification is valid, and this is my account," Imani states, her voice carrying a steely edge that momentarily makes Brad pause. "I would like my ID back, and I would like to complete my transaction." Brad's nostrils flare. He's not accustomed to being challenged, especially not by someone he's already decided is beneath his station. "I've made my decision." He places her ID and bank card into a folder and closes it. "We won't be serving you today." The words echo in the hushed lobby, a collective intake of breath from the onlookers. Time seems to freeze in that moment of naked injustice. This isn't just happening to me, Imani thinks. This happens to people who look like me every day, people without my power, or position. Sir, she says, her voice now carrying an authority that makes Brad blink. You're making a serious mistake. Brad smirks, supremely confident in his little kingdom. Security, he calls to Chuck, please escort this individual out if she doesn't leave voluntarily. Chuck hesitates, sensing something isn't right. Brad's request crosses a line that makes the guard distinctly uncomfortable. Imani stands perfectly still, a storm of emotions churning inside her. The humiliation burns, but something else rises with it: resolve. In this moment of public degradation, she makes a decision that will change everything. Actually, she says, reaching for her phone, I think I'll be staying. The stage is set. In this very moment of public humiliation, a dramatic power reversal is only minutes away. 6 hours earlier, before the sun had even risen over Atlanta's skyline, Imani Sharp's alarm went off at 4:30 a.m. Her morning routine was precise: 15 minutes of meditation, 30 minutes on the treadmill, shower, dress, review the day's agenda. But today wasn't an ordinary day. Today she wasn't going straight to her corner office on the 45th floor of Meridian Trust headquarters. Today, she had a different mission. Imani stood in front of her closet, bypassing her collection of tailored power suits and designer dresses. Instead, she reached for items she rarely wore to work: dark wash jeans, a simple navy blouse, minimal jewelry. She pulled her natural curls back into a modest ponytail, applied minimal makeup, and studied her reflection. The woman looking back at her wasn't Imani Sharp, CEO of Meridian Trust Bank. She was just Imani, a regular customer planning to visit one of her own branches. Perfect, she whispered to herself. 24 years ago, Imani had started her career as an 18-year-old teller at Meridian Trust, working weekends and summers to pay for college. Back then, she'd been one of only 3 Black employees in the entire regional branch network. She remembered the small indignities: customers asking to speak with someone else when she tried to help them, supervisors scrutinizing her cash drawer more frequently than her white colleagues, the constant pressure to prove herself worthy of basic respect. Each step up the corporate ladder had been a battle. From teller to personal banker, from banker to loan officer, from loan officer to branch manager, from regional director to VP of operations. When the board finally named her CEO 3 months ago, the first Black woman to hold the position in the bank's 103-year history, business publications called it a groundbreaking appointment. What they didn't mention was how much she'd sacrificed to get there, or how determined she was to transform the institution from within. Imani's phone buzzed with a text from her executive assistant. Car downstairs in 10? She typed back. Taking my own car today. Meeting you at 11 o'clock. She didn't explain why. As CEO, she didn't have to point. 40 minutes later, Imani pulled into a coffee shop parking lot 5 blocks from the Oak Ridge branch. She opened a folder on the passenger seat containing printouts of customer complaints, specifically complaints about discrimination at that particular branch. One report had kept her up last night. A Black businessman alleged he was treated with unusual suspicion when attempting to withdraw $20,000 for a property down payment. The branch manager, one Bradley Whitman, had questioned the legitimacy of his funds despite his excellent account history. It wasn't an isolated incident. 3 similar complaints had been filed against the Oak Ridge branch in the past year alone. All involved Black or Latino customers. All involved large transactions. All were handled by customer service representatives who sent form letter apologies with generic gift cards. None had resulted in actual consequences for the employees involved. Imani had implemented new diversity training company-wide within her first month as CEO. But training alone wouldn't fix a culture problem, not if the problematic behaviors were being modeled by branch leadership. She needed to see it firsthand. Hence today's unannounced visit. The Oak Ridge branch served one of Atlanta's wealthiest areas. Its clientele was predominantly white, though the surrounding neighborhoods had diversified considerably in recent years. Imani checked her watch. 8:58 a.m. The branch would open in 2 minutes. Perfect timing to be one of the first customers of the day. 9:01 a.m. Imani pushed through the heavy glass doors of the Oak Ridge branch. The lobby smelled of lemon polish and fresh coffee. A receptionist greeted an older white couple who had entered just before Imani. Good morning, Mr. and Mrs. Caldwell. Coffee. It's fresh. The woman gestured to a small refreshment station where an expensive coffee machine hummed. When Imani approached moments later, the same receptionist offered a noticeably cooler welcome. "How can I help you?" No name greeting, no coffee offer. It was subtle, perhaps unconscious, but Imani noticed. She'd experienced this type of discrepancy hundreds of times throughout her career. "I'd like to make a withdrawal," Imani replied pleasantly. The receptionist directed her to the teller line with a perfunctory nod. Imani took her place behind three other customers and observed the branch operations. The interior was immaculately maintained, crown molding, hardwood accents, plush seating in the waiting area. A wall displayed community awards the branch had won. Front and center was a photo of branch manager Brad Whitman shaking hands with a local business owner, a white man, at a charity golf tournament. Imani had reviewed Brad's file during her morning prep. 25 years with the bank. Excellent performance metrics. For promotions, one note in his HR record about a customer service, cultural sensitivity, complaint that had been addressed internally 5 years ago. No details on what that meant. As the line moved forward, Imani overheard Brad's voice coming from his office nearby. He was speaking loudly on the phone. "Jim, great to hear from you." "Yes, absolutely. We can fast-track that application for you. That's what friends are for, right?" When her turn came, Imani approached the teller window where a young South Asian woman named Nina Patel, according to her nameplate, greeted her with a professional smile. "Good morning. How can I help you today?" Nina asked. "I'd like to make a withdrawal," Imani said, sliding her ID and a withdrawal slip across the counter. $50,000, please." Nina's eyes widened slightly at the amount, a normal reaction to a large cash withdrawal request. She examined Imani's ID and typed the account number into her computer. Imani watched Nina's expression change when the account information populated her screen. A personal checking account with a 7-figure balance, flagged as Executive VIP Client. Nina looked from the screen to Imani, clearly puzzled by the disconnect between the high-profile account and the casually dressed woman before her. But she remained professional. "I'll need to get approval for a withdrawal of this size." "One moment, please." Nina picked up her phone, but before she could make the call, Brad Whitman appeared beside her, as if summoned by some invisible alarm. He placed a firm hand on the counter, his wedding ring clinking against the marble surface. "Is there a problem, Nina?" he asked, his voice carrying across the quiet lobby. "Ms. Sharp would like to withdraw," Nina began, but Brad cut her off. With a wave. "I'll handle this," he said dismissively. He took the withdrawal slip from Nina's hand and examined it, then looked Imani up and down, taking in her casual attire. His eyes narrowed almost imperceptibly. "Mrs. Sharp, is it?" he said, glancing at her ID with exaggerated scrutiny. Imani noted the subtle disrespect. Her name was Ms. Sharp, not Mrs. The unnecessary pause suggested even her name might be fraudulent. "Yes, that's correct," Imani replied calmly. "And you wish to withdraw $50,000? In cash?" Brad's tone made the request sound absurd, even suspicious. "That's what the withdrawal slip indicates," Imani said, maintaining her composure. Brad pursed his lips. "Large withdrawals require additional verification. May I ask the purpose of this withdrawal?" It was an unusual question. While banks sometimes ask for ID and require IRS forms for large cash transactions, questioning a customer's motives isn't standard protocol unless there's legitimate suspicion of illegal activity. Imani understood immediately. He suspected her, by default, simply because a black woman in casual clothes requesting a large sum didn't fit his idea of a legitimate customer. "I'm making a real estate investment," she responded briefly. In truth, she planned to donate the money to a community education initiative anonymously, but that was none of his business. Brad scrutinized her ID again, holding it under the desk lamp and turning it over as if searching for signs of forgery. "This doesn't quite look like you," he remarked with thinly veiled skepticism. In the ID photo, taken 3 years ago, Imani wore her hair straightened and was dressed in a pinstripe blazer. Today, with her natural curls and casual attire, she looked different, but not unrecognizably so. Any reasonable person could see it was the same woman. "It's a few years old," Imani explained patiently. "My hairstyle has changed." Brad frowned and tapped a few keys on Nina's computer, his eyebrows rising as he viewed her account details. You have a very substantial balance with us. Why haven't I seen you at this branch before? The question was laden with incredulity. Imani knew an honest answer, because I typically operate out of headquarters, would blow her cover. I usually bank online, she said instead, which was also true. Brad gave a thin smile that didn't reach his eyes. Online, He nodded to Nina, dismissing her back to the line of waiting customers. Now it was just him and Imani at the counter. Other patrons began stealing glances. A middle-aged black couple at the lone desk looked over with concern. An older white gentleman fidgeted with his watch, clearly uncomfortable with the raised voices. The quiet background music, a soft piano instrumental, did nothing to ease the growing tension. Brad leaned in and lowered his voice, though it remained audible to anyone nearby. Frankly, this is a lot of money. We take fraud very seriously. Here, the insinuation was clear. Imani's jaw tensed. She had intentionally used her personal account, not her CEO corporate account, to appear as any other customer, and it was flagged VIP. He should have treated her with the courtesy he gave other wealthy clients. Instead, he only saw a black woman with an unusually large bank balance. I understand security concerns, Imani replied evenly. I can answer any verification questions about my account. Or you can call the number on file. It will ring my phone right here. She held up her smartphone, showing the screen with the Meridian Trust app open to her profile. Brad's eyes flickered to it, then back to her with undisguised distrust. Rather than follow those reasonable verification steps, he chose escalation. Actually, I think I'll need to hold on to your ID and card while we investigate a few things. Before Imani could protest, he had tucked her identification into a folder. He stepped away from the counter and spoke in a low tone to another employee, who nodded and picked up a phone, possibly calling security, or worse, the police. Imani's stomach dropped. This was exactly the kind of scenario she'd feared, being on the receiving end of baseless suspicion in her own bank. And it was getting worse. Brad returned after a minute, announcing loudly, I'm sorry, but we cannot proceed with this transaction. In fact, we won't be able to serve you here today. The finality in his voice stunned everyone nearby. A gasp escaped from an older woman in line behind Imani. Several customers exchanged uncomfortable glances. Security guard Chuck took a step forward, clearly conflicted about the situation unfolding before him. Imani felt the blood rush to her face. Brad's words hung in the air, each one a dagger of unjustified rejection. The tension had built to a breaking point, and something had to give. In that moment, as Brad stood smugly before her, holding her identification hostage and questioning her very presence in this space, Imani knew she had a choice to make. She could walk away quietly and handle this through official channels later. That was the safe approach, or she could stand her ground right now and expose the prejudice playing out in real time. Brad's hand rested possessively on the folder containing her ID, his expression one of triumph and dismissal. He clearly expected her to leave without further protest. Another problem customer, effectively removed from his pristine branch. But Imani Sharp hadn't become CEO by backing down from confrontation. And she certainly wasn't about to start. Now 0.9 to 15 Imani's mouth went dry as Brad's declaration echoed in the vaulted lobby. We won't be able to serve you today. The absurdity of being rejected from her own bank nearly took her breath away. For a moment, time slowed, and every sensation intensified. The cool marble counter beneath her palms, the burning heat in her cheeks, the weight of strangers' stares. On her back, a couple of tellers exchanged uneasy glances. One started ushering the next customer in line to a different station, desperate to pretend nothing unusual was happening. Chuck, the security guard, took a half step forward, his hand hovering uncertainly near his belt, eyes flicking between Brad and Imani as if trying to assess where his duty actually lay. The only person who seemed entirely comfortable was Brad Whitman himself. He looked at Imani with a mixture of triumph and disdain, a man accustomed to exercising power without consequences. Mr. Whitman, Imani said, her voice measured despite her racing heart. I've provided my identification and account verification. On what specific grounds are you refusing service? Brad sniffed and gave a shallow shrug. Let's call it professional judgment. The documents you've provided, something just doesn't add up. He spoke as if explaining a simple truth to a child. The condescension cut through the quiet lobby. A heavy silence fell. All eyes focused on the confrontation now, business temporarily forgotten. Imani felt a wave of emotions: indignation, disbelief, and a deep personal hurt. This wasn't just any bank. This was her bank. She dedicated her career to this institution, rising through its ranks, only to be treated with naked prejudice by one of her own managers. 9:18 a.m. Brad turned slightly toward Chuck. Security, please escort this individual out. If she doesn't leave voluntarily. He deliberately avoided using Imani's name, reducing her to an unwelcome presence rather than a person. Chuck approached with visible hesitation, his forehead creased with concern. Sir, is that really necessary? She hasn't caused any disturbance. Brad cut him off with a sharp gesture. She is refusing to leave after being denied service. That constitutes trespassing. His voice carried an authority that brooked no argument from subordinates. Imani realized the situation had truly spiraled beyond reason. Being ousted from her own branch while attempting a legitimate transaction violated everything banking was supposed to represent. It mirrored countless stories she'd read about innocent black customers being mistreated. The grandmother in Michigan whose valid check was confiscated as fraudulent. The Detroit man who had police called on him when trying to deposit settlement checks. This is happening to me right now, she thought, anger and disappointment swelling inside her chest. 9:28 Her mind raced through options. She could comply quietly and leave, then later handle it through corporate channels. That was the safe approach. Walk away, avoid escalation, deal with it through proper procedures. Part of her, the part that had navigated corporate politics for decades, urged this caution. But as she looked around, she saw the distress and empathy in the faces of other customers, especially the black couple who watched with knowing expressions, perhaps recalling their own past experiences. She saw Nina the teller, practically frozen at her station, eyes communicating silent apology for her manager's behavior. Walking away meekly would only validate Brad's actions and reinforce the message that such treatment was acceptable. It would let down everyone who had experienced similar discrimination without the power to fight back. No. This ended now. Imani drew herself up to her full height, squaring her shoulders. I am a long-standing client of this bank, and I know my rights. Her voice carried the authority of countless boardroom confrontations. You have no valid reason to deny me access to my account. Brad's mouth opened in surprise. He clearly hadn't expected pushback from someone he'd already dismissed as irrelevant. Ma'am, I've made my decision. You will return my identification and bank card immediately. Imani continued, her tone leaving no room for argument. A flicker of uncertainty crossed Brad's face. This wasn't following the script he'd expected. Perhaps he'd assumed a black woman in casual clothes wouldn't challenge the authority of a branch manager in his own domain. 9:23 His momentary hesitation quickly hardened back into arrogance. He slapped the folder containing her documents down on the counter, but kept his hand firmly over it. I'm going to ask you one more time to leave, he said, voice dropping to a threatening whisper, or I'll call the authorities. The way he said authorities carried unmistakable menace. Everyone in the lobby understood what that meant. Police involvement, potential escalation, a black person being reported as causing a disturbance at a financial institution. The implications hung heavy in the air. Murmurs rippled through the growing crowd of onlookers. The morning customers who had come for routine transactions were now unwitting witnesses to a dramatic confrontation. A young mother pulled her child closer. An elderly man shook his head in disapproval, though it wasn't clear toward whom. 9:25 am. Do what you need to do, Imani replied, her calm demeanor masking the storm of emotions within. But I'm not leaving without my identification and access to my account. Brad barked a humorless laugh. You're making this much harder than it needs to be. He gestured toward Chuck again. Please remove her from the premises. Chuck stood frozen, clearly torn between following his manager's orders and his own sense of right and wrong. Sir, I don't think. That's not your job, Brad snapped. Your job is to secure this branch, and I'm telling you this person needs to leave. Chuck approached Imani slowly, apologetic tension evident in every movement. Ma'am, please, he said, quietly. I don't want this to escalate. Imani met his eyes with compassion. I understand you're doing your job, Chuck, she said, having noted his name badge. But what's happening here isn't right, and we both know it. The security guard's shoulders slumped slightly. Confirmation in his silence, .9:27 Ambridge's patience visibly thinned. If security won't handle this, I'll call the police myself. He reached for the phone on the counter. A collective intake of breath from the onlookers followed his declaration. For many Black Americans, police involvement in banking disputes had led to traumatic, dangerous, and even deadly outcomes, all over legitimate financial transactions. Imani felt her heartbeat accelerate but maintained her outward composure. Before you make that call, she said evenly, I suggest you consider the repercussions very carefully. Brad paused, hand on the receiver. Is that a threat? His voice lowered dangerously. It's a reality check, Imani replied. What exactly? Will you tell them? That a customer with valid ID and a verified account requested a withdrawal, and instead of following standard verification procedures, you confiscated her identification and attempted to expel her from the premises? Several customers nodded in agreement. Brad's face flushed red. You don't understand how things work in banking, he sputtered, though his certainty seemed to waver. We have protocols. I understand banking better than you might think, Imani countered. And I know the difference between security protocols and discrimination. 9:30 Ambridge's knuckles whitened around the phone. You're causing a scene, he accused, gesturing at the gathered onlookers. You created this scene, Imani corrected him. I simply asked to access my account, a basic service this bank is obligated to provide. She could see Brad calculating his options, perhaps realizing for the first time that the situation might not end in his favor. The witnesses, the lack of actual suspicious activity, the clear documentation, all worked against his position. But pride prevented his retreat. This conversation is over, he declared with false finality. Leave now, or face the consequences. 9:32. Amped confrontation had reached its apex. Brad stood rigid with threatened authority. Imani remained planted in place, refusing to be moved. The entire branch had come to a standstill, all eyes fixed on this clash of wills. Brad made a show of dialing the phone. Yes, police please, he began, staring directly at Imani, expecting her to back down. She didn't flinch. Nina, the teller who had first assisted Imani, suddenly stepped forward. Mr. Whitman, she interjected nervously. Perhaps we should double-check the account verification before. Get back to your station, Brad hissed without looking at her. I'll handle this. Nina retreated, shooting an apologetic glance at Imani. 9:34 a.m. Yes, we have a situation at Meridian Trust Bank, Oakridge branch, Brad continued into the phone. A woman is refusing to leave after being denied service. She's becoming aggressive. The lie hung ugly in the air. Imani hadn't raised her voice once, hadn't made a single threatening move. The Black couple who had been watching exchanged alarmed glances. The woman whispered something to her husband, who nodded gravely. Everyone recognized the dangerous territory. This situation was entering. Brad's smug expression returned as he relayed the address to the dispatcher. He covered the mouthpiece and addressed Imani. Last chance to leave on your own terms. 9:35 a.m. Imani took a deep breath. The moment had come for her final decision. Continue this dangerous game of chicken or reveal her identity and end it now. She thought of all the customers who had faced similar treatment without her resources or authority. People who were questioned, humiliated, even arrested while attempting legitimate banking transactions. People who looked like her, dressed like her, but lacked the power to fight back and owe more. Fine, Imani said, her voice cutting through the tension. Let's end this right now. Brad's expression shifted to triumph, assuming she was finally backing down. Instead, Imani reached into her purse and pulled out her phone. Not to call for help, not to record the incident, but to make a very specific call. Her fingers moved deliberately across the screen, selecting a contact that would change everything. Brad sneered. Calling reinforcements? Go ahead. The police. Station's 2 blocks down. Imani didn't respond. Her gaze remained steady as she pressed the speaker button. The ringtone echoed loudly in the hushed lobby. In 2 rings, a crisp professional voice answered. This is Robert Hale. Brad's smirk faltered, He recognized that name instantly. It was his boss's boss, the regional executive who oversaw all area branches. "Hello, Robert," Imani said clearly, her eyes never leaving Brad's increasingly confused face. "This is Imani Sharp. I'm at the Oak Ridge branch, and we have a situation that requires your immediate attention." "Ms. Sharp, Imani, good morning." Robert Hale's voice through the speakerphone carried unmistakable respect and a hint of surprise. "Is everything all right at Oak Ridge?" The color drained from Brad Whitman's face. His mouth fell slightly open, as his eyes darted between the phone and the woman he'd been treating like a potential criminal. Something in Robert's tone, the deference, the familiarity, triggered an alarm in his mind. "No, Robert, everything is not all right," Imani replied, her gaze locked on Brad. "I'm dealing with a case of blatant discrimination by your Oak Ridge branch manager." Brad's phone slipped from his fingers, clattering onto the counter. The police dispatcher's tiny voice still called out, "Sir, are you there? What's the nature of your emergency?" He fumbled to end that call, nearly knocking over a pen holder in his sudden clumsiness. "Discrimination?" Robert's voice sharpened. "What's happened?" "I came to conduct a routine transaction at this branch. Your manager, Mr. Whitman, refused to process my withdrawal, confiscated my identification, attempted to have me removed from the premises, and just now called the police, claiming I was being aggressive, all because he decided I didn't look like I belonged here." A deathly silence fell over the lobby. Brad's complexion had shifted from flushed confidence to ashen terror in seconds. The realization was crashing over him in waves. Imani Sharp, the CEO of Meridian Trust Bank, was standing before him. The very person whose photograph had been circulating in company newsletters, whose appointment had made national business news, whose diversity initiatives had been the topic of recent all-hands meetings, and he had just tried to have her thrown out of her own bank. "My God," Robert breathed through the speaker. "Brad Whitman did this? He's there now, standing right in front of me." Imani confirmed, never breaking eye contact with the now trembling manager. Brad's lips moved soundlessly, trying to form words of apology, explanation, or excuse, but nothing emerged. Beads of sweat appeared on his forehead as the full magnitude of his error became apparent to everyone watching. "I'll be there immediately," Robert said, urgency evident in his voice. 30 minutes max. "Should I bring HR?" "Yes," Imani replied, firmly. "We'll need assistance with personnel changes." The phrase personnel changes hung in the air like a guillotine blade. Brad flinched visibly as its meaning registered. "Consider it done," Robert confirmed. "And Imani, I'm deeply sorry this happened. We'll discuss it when you arrive," she answered, ending the call with a deliberate tap on her screen. For a moment, the only sounds in the lobby were the hum of the air conditioning and the muted financial news playing on a wall-mounted television. Then, like a dam breaking, reactions cascaded through the room. Gasps, murmurs, and one clear, "Oh my God," from somewhere in the back. Chuck, the security guard, exhaled a breath he'd been holding for what seemed like minutes. A slow grin spread across his face as he realized what had just happened. Nina the teller pressed her hand to her mouth, eyes wide with shock, and, perhaps, a touch of satisfaction. Brad finally found his voice, though it emerged as a pathetic croak. "Ms. Sharp, I had no idea. I never meant to." Imani held up one hand, instantly silencing him. The power dynamic had flipped completely. Her smallest gesture now carried more authority than his loudest command. "Mr. Whitman," she said, her voice steady but cool, "I don't recall asking for your explanation yet." She extended her other hand, palm up. "My identification and bank card." Now, Brad fumbled with the folder, nearly dropping its contents as he hurried to comply. His hands trembled as he placed her ID and bank card in her outstretched palm, careful not to touch her fingers with his own. "Thank you," she said with pointed formality. Brad swallowed hard, his Adam's apple bobbing. "Please understand, Miss Sharp, if I had known who you were." "That's precisely the problem," Imani cut in, her voice carrying throughout the now silent lobby. "You shouldn't need to know I'm the CEO to treat me with basic dignity and respect." A murmur of agreement rippled through the onlookers. The black couple at the lone desk exchanged knowing glances, while an elderly white woman nodded emphatically. Imani looked around, suddenly aware that this had become more than a personal confrontation. It was a teachable moment, not just for Brad, but for every employee watching, every customer witnessing. The impact would extend far beyond this branch. This day, she drew herself up to her full height. When she spoke again, her voice carried the weight of every boardroom battle she'd ever fought, every barrier she'd broken. Mr. Whitman, your behavior today violated the core values of Meridian Trust. You judged me based on appearance, ignored verification protocols that would have confirmed my identity, escalated a routine transaction into a public confrontation, and were prepared to involve law enforcement rather than admit you might be wrong. Brad's shoulders slumped. Each word struck like a physical blow, dismantling the authority he'd wielded so carelessly minutes before. I came here today, Imani continued, because this branch has received multiple complaints of discriminatory treatment toward customers of color. I wanted to see if those complaints reflected isolated incidents or a cultural problem. She paused. Meaningfully, I believe I have my answer. Brad's face crumpled. Ms. Sharp, please, I have a family, a mortgage. 25 years with Meridian, 25 years, Imani echoed. That's a long time to develop such deeply ingrained biases. How many customers have you treated this way, Mr. Whitman? How? Many people without my position or power walked away feeling humiliated, unwelcome, or unworthy. Brad had no answer. His gaze dropped to the floor. Imani turned slightly, addressing Chuck. Mr. Rivers, would you please accompany Mr. Whitman to his office to collect his personal belongings? Chuck straightened instantly. Yes, ma'am, he replied, professionalism now tinged with unmistakable satisfaction. Brad looked up, panic flashing across his features. Personal belongings? You don't mean, Bradley Whitman. Imani stated formally, effective immediately, your employment with Meridian Trust Bank is terminated. A collective gasp echoed through the lobby. Brad's knees seemed to buckle. He caught himself on the edge of the counter. Terminated? He whispered hoarsely. Just like that. Just like that, Imani confirmed. Though there was nothing just about how you treated me. Or, I suspect, many others before me. Brad's face contorted, cycling through shock, disbelief, anger, and finally, defeated resignation. You can't do this, he muttered, though his tone suggested he knew very well that she could. I believe you'll find I can, Imani replied evenly. And I have. Please surrender your office keys and access card. With shaking hands, Brad unclipped his ID badge from his lapel and pulled a ring of keys from his pocket. He placed them on the counter with a defeated gesture, as if surrendering weapons. Imani nodded to Chuck, who stepped forward. This way, sir, the guard said, professional but firm. Chuck gently took Brad's elbow, guiding the shell-shocked former manager toward the back offices. As they passed through the lobby, customers parted like the Red Sea. Brad walked as if in a trance, head down, the perfect picture of a fallen king. Just 15 minutes ago, he had ruled this branch with arrogant certainty. Now he shuffled toward the exit under escort, career destroyed by his own prejudice. Once Brad disappeared down the hallway, a release of tension flooded the lobby. Someone began to applaud, just a few hesitant claps at first, then spreading into genuine applause. It was an uncommon sound in a bank, but these were uncommon circumstances. Imani acknowledged the support with a gracious nod, then turned to address the remaining staff. Please resume normal operations, she instructed calmly. Mr. Hale will be here shortly to assist with transition. Tellers returned to their stations with renewed energy. Nina caught Imani's eye and mouthed a silent thank you before turning to her next customer. The lobby gradually filled with the familiar sounds of banking. Receipt printers humming, keyboards clicking, muted conversations about deposits and withdrawals. Imani stepped aside, watching the branch return to its rhythm. She felt a complex mixture of emotions, satisfaction at justice served, sadness that it had been necessary, determination to ensure this incident led to lasting change. A young black woman approached hesitantly. Excuse me, she said softly. I just wanted to say, what you did was important. I've been afraid to come into this branch ever since Mr. Whitman questioned my check deposit last month. Made me feel like I was doing something wrong. Imani reached out and briefly touched the woman's arm. Not anymore, she promised. And I'd appreciate if you tell me about your experience before you leave today. The woman nodded gratefully. and returned to her place in line. 20 minutes later, Chuck returned from escorting Brad out through the employee entrance. The former manager had departed with a small box of personal items. His career at Meridian Trust ended as suddenly as a summer thunderstorm. "He's gone, Miss Sharp," Chuck reported. "Turned in his parking pass and everything." "Thank you, Chuck," Imani replied. "And thank you for doing the right thing earlier. I noticed your hesitation to follow his orders." Chuck's expression grew serious. "Ma'am, I've seen how power can be misused. I left law enforcement because of it. Couldn't stand by and watch it happen here too." Imani nodded in understanding. "We need more people like you, who recognize when authority is being abused." She glanced around the branch, at the employees now watching her with a mixture of awe and nervousness, at the customers conducting their business with renewed confidence. In the span of 30 minutes, the atmosphere had transformed completely. Power isn't about position, she reflected quietly, almost to herself. It's about purpose. Brad had the position, but he forgot the purpose: to serve all customers with dignity and respect. Chuck nodded thoughtfully. Some people see power as control over others. Real power is using your influence to make things right. Exactly, Imani agreed. And today was just the beginning. Through the front windows, she saw Robert Hale's car pulling into the parking lot, followed by a vehicle she recognized as belonging to the HR director. Phase 1, addressing the immediate injustice, was complete. Now came the harder work. Ensuring this branch, and every branch in the Meridian network, truly embodied the values they claimed to uphold. The power reversal wasn't just about one manager losing his position. It was about transforming a culture, one decisive action at a time. The small conference room at the back of the Oak Ridge branch hummed with nervous energy. 2 hours after Brad Whitman's dramatic exit, Imani Sharp sat at the head of the oval table, flanked by Regional Director Robert Hale and HR Director Melissa Chun. Across from them, the branch's remaining staff, 7 tellers, 2 loan officers, an assistant manager, and security guard Chuck, waited with a mixture of apprehension and curiosity. "I want to begin by thanking you all for your patience today," Imani opened, her tone professional yet warm. "What happened this morning was unfortunate, but it presents an opportunity for growth and change." Robert Hale nodded emphatically. "I want to personally apologize for the behavior you experienced, Miss Sharp. It's completely unacceptable." Imani acknowledged his apology with a slight nod. "I'm not here for apologies, Robert. I'm here for solutions." She surveyed the faces around the table. "Today I experienced firsthand what some of our customers have been reporting for months. The question is, how deep does this problem run?" A heavy silence blanketed the room. Staff members exchanged uneasy glances, no one wanting to be the first to speak. Finally, Nina Patel, the teller who had initially assisted Imani, raised her hand tentatively. "Miss Sharp, may I say something?" "Please, Nina. And everyone else, this is a safe space. No repercussions for honesty." Nina straightened in her chair. "Mr. Whitman's behavior today wasn't unusual." Her voice quivered slightly. "He routinely scrutinized Black and Latino customers more intensely, especially for large transactions. I've seen him request additional verification that wasn't required by policy, suggest smaller withdrawal amounts, or make comments about unusual account activity when nothing seemed unusual to me." Melissa Chun from HR leaned forward, concern etching her features. "Why wasn't this reported?" Nina's eyes dropped to the table. "I tried once. Filed a complaint after he made an elderly Black gentleman wait 2 hours to cash a $5,000 check, calling 3 different verification sources. The complaint disappeared. 2 weeks later, Mr. Whitman reduced my hours." The message was clear. Murmurs of agreement rippled through the group. One by one, staff members began sharing similar stories. Brad questioning a Spanish-speaking customers. Documents while waving through white clients with minimal review. Brad scrutinizing the validity of checks from minority-owned businesses. Brad making jokes about certain neighborhoods and the creditworthiness of their residents. Imani listened, her expression neutral, but her mind cataloging every detail. This wasn't just one manager's bias. It was a systematic failure of oversight and accountability. "Why didn't any of you escalate these concerns beyond Mr. Whitman?" she asked finally. Chuck spoke up from his position near the door. "Fear, ma'am. Pure and simple. Jobs aren't easy to come by, and Brad made it clear he had friends in regional management. He glanced apologetically at Robert Hale. No offense intended, sir. Robert's face flushed. None taken, because you're right. We failed you. We should have seen the pattern in customer complaints, should have investigated more thoroughly. That stops today. Imani nodded decisively. Here's what happens next. Melissa will conduct one-on-one interviews with each of you to document these incidents properly. Robert will personally oversee this branch until we appoint new leadership, someone committed to equal treatment for all customers. She leaned forward, making eye contact with each person around the table. Most importantly, I'm implementing a zero-tolerance policy for discrimination, effective immediately across all Meridian Trust branches. Any employee who treats customers differently based on race, gender, appearance, or background will be terminated. Period. The tension in the room visibly eased. Several staff members straightened in their chairs, relief evident in their postures. This won't be easy, Imani continued. Change rarely is, but it's necessary, not just for Meridian Trust's reputation, but because it's fundamentally right. 1 week later, Imani stood at the podium in Meridian Trust's headquarters auditorium, addressing all 2,500 employees via livestream. Behind her, a simple slide displayed the bank's new initiative, Banking for All, Equity in Action. Last week, I experienced discrimination in one of our own branches. She began, her voice strong and clear. As your CEO, I could end that situation immediately. But countless customers face similar treatment every day without my authority or resources. The Atlanta Journal-Constitution's headline flashed on screen. Bank CEO goes undercover, fires manager for discrimination. The story had caught fire across national media, with outlets from CNBC to the Washington Post covering the incident and Meridian Trust's response. The term banking while black exists for a reason, Imani continued. Studies show blackened Latino customers face additional scrutiny, longer wait times, and more rejected transactions than white customers with identical financial profiles. This isn't someone else's problem. It's happening in our branches, to our customers, despite our existing policies. She outlined the comprehensive changes being implemented, mandatory bias training conducted by external experts, mystery shoppers from diverse backgrounds to test customer experiences, a new reporting system that bypassed local management, revised performance metrics that included equitable treatment markers, and a customer advisory council composed primarily of people of color. Our board of directors has unanimously approved these measures and the funding required to implement them fully, Imani announced. This isn't just a PR exercise, it's a fundamental restructuring of how we serve our communities. In the front row, the entire board nodded in solidarity. The initial shock of the Oak Ridge incident had quickly transformed into unified support for Imani's vision. When video of her confrontation with Brad Whitman, captured on security cameras, circulated among board members, even the most conservative directors recognized the urgent need for change. 3 months later, Imani returned to the Oak Ridge branch for an official visit, this time in her CEO attire, with her executive team in tow. The transformation was remarkable. Under new manager Dina Washington, a black woman promoted from within the company, the branch had become a model for Meridian Trust's reformed culture. A.S. Imani toured the facility. She noted the diverse customers being served with equal attention and respect. The wall that once featured Brad's charity golf photo now displayed the branch's perfect scores on their last 3 equity audits. Most notably, the customer base had expanded significantly, with many new accounts opened by residents from previously underserved neighborhoods. Nina Patel, now promoted to assistant manager, greeted Imani warmly. You changed everything that day, she said quietly. Not just for us, but for the entire company. Later that evening, Imani sat in her office, reviewing the quarterly numbers. Contrary to some executives' fears, Meridian Trust's bold stance had strengthened its market position. New accounts were up 22%, and customer satisfaction scores had reached all-time highs across demographic groups. More meaningful to Imani were the letters piling up on her desk, messages from customers sharing their experiences of finally feeling respected and valued by their bank. One note particularly touched her. For the first time in my 62 years, I walked into a bank without that knot in my stomach, without wondering if I'd be treated like I don't belong. Thank you for seeing us. Imani ran her fingers over the handwritten words. Her unexpected confrontation at Oak Ridge had evolved into something much larger than one manager's termination. It had become a catalyst for genuine cultural transformation within Meridian Trust, and a powerful statement to the entire banking industry. Banking while black shouldn't be an experience different from anyone else's, she reflected, gazing out at the Atlanta skyline glowing in the dusk. We're not just changing policies, we're changing lives, one transaction, one customer, one branch at a time. The justice served that Monday morning had rippled outward, touching thousands of lives in ways that would continue long after the headlines faded. For Imani Sharp, that was the true measure of power, not the authority to fire one prejudiced manager, but the ability to ensure no customer ever faced that treatment again. 1 year later, Imani opens her leather-bound journal, pen hovering over the blank page. Today marks 1 year since the Oak Ridge incident. What began as a moment of personal humiliation transformed into a movement within our company and beyond. We've changed not just policies, but hearts and minds. The numbers tell one story: discrimination complaints down 94%, customer satisfaction at record highs. But the human impact tells another. When power confronts prejudice head-on, real change follows. The ripple effects spread far beyond Meridian Trust. 3 major banking competitors have adopted similar anti-discrimination measures. Congressional hearings on banking while black cited Imani's experience as evidence for stronger financial services regulations. Most importantly, customers once marginalized now walk into branches nationwide with greater confidence that they'll be treated with dignity. Corporate accountability isn't just about punishing wrongdoing. It's about creating environments where discrimination cannot take root or flourish. Have you experienced discrimination at a financial institution? Document everything. Know your rights. Speak up, not just through official channels, but publicly if necessary. Your voice matters. Your dignity is non-negotiable. Sometimes justice requires someone willing to stand their ground, even when every instinct says to walk away.